They called it a necessary decision. I called it betrayal in broad daylight. I had been working in the IT department of a manufacturing firm in Lexington, Kentucky for nearly a decade. My name's Eli Walker, and for most of those years, I was the guy they only noticed when something broke printer jams, server hiccups, or when someone forgot their password. I never needed the spotlight. I just kept the whole system running. Then came Rachel, my younger sister. Fresh out of grad school and a little green, she asked me for help. I got her the interview, coached her through it, and even stayed late to train her when she landed the job. She was eager and bright, but everything changed once she started dating the nephew of our COO. Suddenly, Rachel wasn't my little sister anymore. She was climbing fast. And I was being pushed out. Access revoked. Projects reassigned. Then came the real knife in the back, a false report accusing me of leaking client data. The complaint came from Rachel herself. HR barely blinked. Mark, my manager, looked me in the eye and said, "It's best for everyone, Eli." He walked me out like I was a thief. What they didn't know, what Rachel, Mark, and even my oldest friend Carla didn't see, was that I'd spent the last 7 years quietly preparing for a day just like this. They fired me on a Friday. By Monday, I owned the building. They thought I was just the IT guy. Eli Walker, the quiet one, in the back office of Phoenix Manufacturing, a mid-sized industrial firm tucked just outside Lexington, Kentucky. I kept my head down, solved problems, made sure the systems ran like clockwork. I didn't speak up in meetings, didn't schmooze in the break room, and never complained when the credit went elsewhere. That silence made them underestimate me. When my sister Rachel turned on me with the help of my manager Mark Stevens and my childhood friend Carla Brooks, they thought they were pushing out a nuisance. Just dead weight. I saw them grinning as security took my badge. Mark gave me that smug HR line about looking forward, not backward. Rachel wouldn't even look me in the eye. And Carla. She toasted my replacement the same afternoon. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that I wasn't just an employee. For the past 7 years, I'd been quietly building a second life. Back when I was getting elbowed out of promotions and passed over for raises, I started channeling my frustration into something productive, a tech company of my own. I called it Ironclad Systems, focused on cybersecurity for industrial operations, exactly the kind of software companies like Phoenix Manufacturing needed but never took seriously. I kept it quiet. I registered everything under holding firms and subsidiaries. No flashy branding, no headlines. I didn't want eyes on me. I wanted leverage. It started small, one contract, one licensing deal. Then I began acquiring other small firms. Through those mergers, Ironclad began to grow, not just in size, but in reach. And eventually, I set my sights back on Phoenix, not for employment, but for equity. Piece by piece, I began acquiring shares of Phoenix Manufacturing under a separate corporate name, Monarch Holdings, LLC. It took time, patience, and a whole lot of paperwork, but no one ever traced it back to me. By the time I was escorted out that Friday afternoon, Monarch Holdings owned 72% of the company, and I owned Monarch Holdings. The final transaction went through just 8 days before they fired me. So when I walked into the boardroom the following Monday, I wasn't asking for my job back. I was reclaiming what was already mine. No badge, no apology, just a thick manila envelope in my hand and a legal team on standby. I didn't even flinch when Rachel's mouth dropped open or when Carla nearly dropped her glass of champagne. I handed the documents to the company attorney and said 6 words that changed everything. I'm here to take full control. The look on their faces was worth every long night and quiet sacrifice. The boardroom went dead silent as the attorney read the ownership paperwork aloud. Mark started sweating. Rachel looked like she might faint. Carla stood frozen like she'd seen a ghost. They had no idea. They thought they'd fired a doormat. Instead, they fired the majority owner. I didn't rub it in, at least not at first. I stayed calm, focused, and professional. But deep down, I knew this moment had been a long time coming. I wasn't just getting justice. I was taking back my narrative. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption with receipts. And I had plenty more to show. They were still popping champagne when I pulled the rug out from under them. 2 days after they walked me out like a temp who'd stolen printer ink, I returned not with a box of my things, but with a folder of legal documents and every ounce of leverage they never saw coming. The boardroom looked like it was set up for a graduation party. Gold balloons, a cake that read, "Welcome New Leadership," and a group of people too proud to realize they'd made the biggest mistake of their careers. Rachel, my sister, stood at the front of the room in a tailored green dress like she owned the place. Carla, my former best friend, stood beside her champagne glass in hand, and Mark, my ex-manager, hovered in the back, looking satisfied like the puppet master who finally cut his strings. They didn't know I'd called an emergency board meeting that evening under my legal name as the majority shareholder. They didn't know I had the authority to make executive changes without their input. And they sure as hell didn't know I was about to take everything they thought they'd stolen. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to shout. All I had to do was slide that envelope across the table. Inside were documents showing ironclad systems through Monarch Holdings held 72% ownership in Phoenix Manufacturing. Every signature, every share, every deal, it was all in there. And my name was printed on the final page, clear as day. Rachel's eyes darted back and forth across the table, looking for someone, anyone to say it wasn't real. Carla's jaw fell open, and Mark just stood there frozen, like he was watching a ghost rise from the dead. The company's attorney read the papers slowly, word by word, until it became impossible to deny I wasn't just some guy they used to know. I was the owner now. Then I stood up. "I'm not here to get my old job back," I said. "I'm here to clean house." 3 folders followed, one for each of them. Inside, termination notices, severance agreements, and the hard truth. Their time at Phoenix Manufacturing was over, effective immediately. Rachel's voice cracked. "You can't erase us like this." I didn't even blink. "You erased me the day you filed that fake report. This is just accountability." Carla started to plead, reminding me of how long we'd known each other, trying to backpedal into some kind of grace. But it was too late. Friends don't stab you in the back to climb the corporate ladder. Friends don't laugh while you're being walked out of a building you secretly own. And Mark, he didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor like he'd finally realized the quiet guy in the corner had been playing chess while they were too busy playing politics. Within 10 minutes, the board voted on the resolution, and with my 72% voting power, it passed. Clean sweep. Gone. But I wasn't finished. I handed each of them a sealed envelope. "Your severance packages," I said calmly. "Think of them as farewell gifts." And then I walked out slow, steady, with every eye in the room following me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the forgotten IT guy, or Rachel's big brother, or Mark's backup tech. I was Eli Walker, majority owner, and the man who just took back everything they tried to steal. I didn't need applause. I didn't need to shout. The silence in that room said everything. They thought I was out for revenge. What I really wanted was the truth. After reclaiming Phoenix Manufacturing and removing Rachel, Carla, and Mark from their positions, there was a moment, just a moment, when I considered letting it end there. Let them go quietly. Let the dust settle. Let everyone move on. But then I remembered what they had done. This wasn't just about me losing a job. This was about betrayal, about a sister I had protected, a friend I had trusted, and a boss I had supported, turning me into a scapegoat to save their own careers. And worse, they didn't just lie. They built their promotions on it. So I opened my briefcase and pulled out another folder thicker than the rest. I laid it flat on the boardroom table and slid it across to the company attorney. Before we closed this meeting, I said calmly, "There's one more thing." Inside that folder was the real story. There were email chains, financial spreadsheets, internal memos, and most damning of all, a forged client report bearing my name, the very one used to justify my firing. Right there at the top of the document, Rachel Walker's digital signature. Beneath it, timestamps from a late-night edit session 2 days before she filed the complaint. She lunged for the folder like it was on fire. Her eyes scanned page after page in disbelief. "This is revenge," she hissed. "You're doing this because I climbed faster than you." I looked her straight in the eye, steady as stone. "No, I'm doing this because you lied. Because you sabotaged someone who once protected you. And because this company, this team, deserves better." Carla tried to interrupt, her voice trembling. "Eli, come on. We've known each other since we were 17. We went through college together. Don't do this." I turned to her slowly. "Real friends don't bury each other for a promotion. You made a choice, Carla, and now you have to live with it." The board didn't say a word. They didn't need to. My 72% ownership gave me full voting authority. Their silence was just confirmation that justice was finally being served. But here's the thing: they expected me to explode, to seek revenge, to throw tantrums like they would have done in my place. Instead, I remained calm. Every step I took was deliberate. Every word I spoke came from a place of control, not chaos. Because for me, this wasn't about destroying them. It was about restoring what they tried to ruin. The final blow wasn't the firings. It wasn't even the exposure. It was the stillness in the room when they realized they hadn't just lost their positions. They had lost every ounce of credibility they once had. I gave them severance packages. I could have left them with nothing, and no one would have blamed me. But I wanted to walk away clean, with my integrity intact. Let the world see the difference between them and me. Rachel's voice cracked as she tried one last time to plead her case. "You can't just erase us." I stood at the doorway, calm as ever. "You erased me the day you let HR walk me out. This is just balance." And I walked away shoulders light for the first time in years. Later that evening, as I sat in my office overlooking the factory floor, I looked at the old security badge I still had from my IT days. I remembered the quiet hours, the unnoticed fixes, the silent loyalty. I kept that badge not as a reminder of the past, but as proof that even the quiet ones can write their own ending. They tried to make me the villain in their story, but I wasn't interested in revenge. I was writing something bigger. I was building truth, and I wasn't done yet. I thought it was over, but the silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the sound of desperation sharpening its claws. 3 days after I fired Rachel, Carla, and Mark, the quiet began to shift. At first, it was just hang-up calls. No caller ID, no voice on the line, just long, eerie silence. Then came the emails, anonymous addresses filled with threats, legal jargon, and veiled accusations. It was all noise. I ignored it. But then someone broke into my downtown condo. They didn't steal anything. Nothing was smashed, nothing missing. Except for one thing, my encrypted laptop had been accessed. That machine contained every major financial document tied to Ironclad Systems, every blueprint, every confidential note. My heart sank. This wasn't about theft. It was a message. Whoever broke in knew exactly what to look for. I pulled the security logs from my building. Sure enough, there it was, access granted, using one of the old Phoenix manufacturing internal badges, one that hadn't been used since I was just the IT guy. But two people still had clearance to the back-end system that handled badge permissions, Rachel and Carla, and that's when it all clicked. They weren't just bitter, they were unraveling. Later, I learned Rachel had tried to launch her own tech startup using pieces of our old proprietary code, the same software we'd been developing for years. She must have copied it before she was fired, thinking no one would trace it back. But when she pitched the idea to investors, background checks lit up red. The falsified report, the scandal, the boardroom takedown, it all surfaced. No one wanted to touch her. She was blacklisted from half the tech sector by the end of the week. Carla didn't do much better. She tried to land a role with a rival firm across state lines, but by then word had spread. Not because I said anything, but because when you burn bridges on your way up, there's no one left to catch you on the way down. They thought I was sabotaging them from the shadows. I wasn't. I hadn't spoken a word, but people talk. And the truth has a way of surfacing when you least expect it. Still, they weren't finished. They orchestrated one last desperate move, a public ambush, during our company's annual shareholder meeting. It was my first time hosting as majority owner. The place was buzzing, projectors lit up with numbers, the press scribbling notes, the board seated proudly. That's when I heard it. Noah Green is a fraud. The voice echoed from the back of the room. Rachel stormed down the aisle, heels pounding like war drums, waving a thick folder in the air. This proves Ironclad Systems was built on stolen code and shell companies. He doesn't own this company legally. Gasps filled the room. Cameras turned. Reporters leaned in. It was a carefully staged spectacle, the kind of moment that could unravel everything I'd built. But I was ready. See, I had been watching their movements ever since the firings. I anticipated desperation. I even planted a fake file labeled Ownership Vulnerability, confidential, into the internal system weeks earlier, knowing someone wouldn't be able to resist taking the bait. And Rachel did exactly what I expected. Inside my black folder was everything: email trails, voice recordings, bank transfers, all proving Rachel had bribed a former employee to forge documents and plant false claims. Then I played a short audio clip through the room's speakers. If we leak this, it'll destroy him. Doesn't matter if it's real. By the time he proves it's fake, the damage will be done. Her voice, clear as day. The room erupted, not in scandal, but in vindication. Rachel stood frozen. Security escorted her out before she could say another word. And me, I didn't flinch. Because when you build your empire with patience and integrity, no amount of noise can shake it. They tried to come back for what they lost, but all they found was the door. They tried to destroy me in front of a crowd, but I chose to rise in front of the world. The annual shareholder meeting for Phoenix Manufacturing had never drawn much attention before. But that year was different. After the leadership shakeup, the company's sudden surge in stock value, and whispers of corporate intrigue, the press came from 3 states. Reporters, analysts, even a few rival executives, all packed into that room to see what the quiet IT guy turned CEO had to say. I had prepared a clean, forward-looking speech, charts, projections, a message about rebuilding with integrity. I wanted to shift the focus from the past to the future. But the past had other plans. Just as I stepped up to the podium, a sharp voice rang out from the back of the room. Rachel. She strode down the center aisle, a thick folder raised in one hand like a warrant for my arrest. Her heels struck the floor like a drumbeat of war. "This man is a fraud," she shouted. "This proves Ironclad Systems, his holding company, was built on stolen software and fake front companies. He doesn't own Phoenix legally." The room gasped. The board looked stunned. Cameras turned. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Rachel stood with that same smug fire she had the day I was fired, like she truly believed she'd already won. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my jacket and calmly pulled out a black folder of my own. I turned to the moderator, who was clearly rattled. "Would you mind if I responded?" I asked. He nodded. I stepped back to the microphone, looked out over the crowd, and gave a faint smile. Actually, I was hoping Rachel would show up today, because I brought something too. The room shifted as I opened my folder and held it up. Inside was a curated collection of evidence email threads, bank transfers, even a phone recording. Rachel had bribed a former Phoenix employee to create forged documents in an attempt to discredit me. She planned this ambush, hoping a public scandal would bring me down before I could prove otherwise. But I'd seen it coming. Weeks earlier, I had planted a fake file in the internal system titled Ownership Vulnerability, Confidential. I knew Rachel's pride wouldn't let her ignore it. She downloaded it, copied it, and built her whole case around a trap. Then I played a 14-second audio clip through the conference room's sound system, her voice clear and sharp. "If we leak this, it'll destroy him. Doesn't matter if it's real. By the time he proves it's fake, the damage will be done." Gasps echoed. A board member whispered, "Oh my God." Flashbulbs started going off again, but not for scandal, for truth. I looked at Rachel. Her hand trembled. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Security was already moving toward her. This time, no one stood in her way. No one offered a defense. They just watched as she was escorted out of the room she once thought she'd run. And then came the applause, soft at first, then building, not for revenge, but for vindication. I stepped back up to the podium and took a deep breath. This company, I said, was built in silence and betrayal. But starting today, it will stand for something different: transparency, integrity, and earned success. The crowd stood. The press captured every word. Rachel had hoped to ruin me in front of an audience. Instead, she gave me the perfect stage to show the world who I really was. Not the guy in the corner cubicle anymore, not the one they underestimated, but the man who stood tall when the storm came and didn't just survive it. He rewrote the ending. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the ghost I buried 15 years ago came back knocking. The morning after the shareholder meeting, I found an envelope on my desk. No return address, just a gold-embossed seal I hadn't seen since my 20s. Inside, a single line, handwritten, "We know who really funded Ironclad. Let's talk." D. There was only one man who ever signed a note like that: Daniel Carter, my ex-business partner, my best friend, the one I thought had died in a fiery car crash over a decade ago. Daniel and I had built the first version of Ironclad in a dusty storage unit behind a Radio Shack, but he wanted shortcuts, risky deals, foreign buyers. I walked away. He disappeared, or so I thought. But now he was back, and he had a flash drive claiming that he seeded the original funding, claiming he owned 49% of everything I'd built. That night, we met in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. He came to threaten. I came prepared. Turns out I'd already bought out the offshore account he used years ago. Legally, he was erased. And just like that, I buried the last ghost in my story. Sometimes, the people who knew you at your weakest will show up when you're at your strongest, trying to pull you back into their shadows. But you don't owe your past a seat at your future. Growth isn't just about rising, it's about protecting what you've built. If you've ever had to outgrow someone or finally stood up for yourself after years of silence, share your story in the comments. And if this hit home, subscribe to this channel. We're building a space for people who've been underestimated and came back stronger. Because quiet storms, they change everything when they arrive.